I want to stick with the cost of living and talk about the inflation figures out today and the underlying rate, of course, remaining above the 3% target at 3.2%. So the Reserve Bank shouldn't be fooled by Labor's trickery when it's making its rates decision next month. Treasurer Jim Chalmers, he thinks it's all going very well at the moment, and the real threat comes from the coalition.
If Peter Dutton had his way, Australians would have been thousands of dollars worse off, and they will be worse off still if he wins the election. The biggest risk to inflation and the cost of living and the economy in 2025 is Peter Dutton and a coalition government.
Let's bring in Gigi Foster, Professor of Economics at the University of New South Wales. Good to talk to you for the first time this year. Gigi, let's cut to the chase. Do you think the RBA can cut rates now?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, Chris, but if I had to give a prediction, I'd say no. My read of Michelle Bullock's task at this moment is to try to differentiate those parts of the economic signals she's seeing that are really due to fundamentals in the economy and those parts that are due to artificial propping up by the government. And you see that in her focus on the trimmed mean inflation, which is not, as you know, yet in that target band between 2% and 3%. And the last time she spoke to us publicly, I think she said something about the middle of the target band. So even if that trimmed mean got to 3%, that's still above 2.5%. Plus, she's not just looking at inflation. Remember, she's looking at unemployment as well. And that figure is still awfully low, below what we typically think of as, and teach our students, to be the NAIRU, the sort of non-accelerating rate of inflation, rate of unemployment. So that's 4.0%, very low for Australia's historical standards. So I think she's still going to be saying to herself, oh, it's just too early to cut the rates. And I still wish, she will say to herself, that that government would start cutting some of the ridiculous expenditures that are keeping inflation going.
Yeah, and clearly the government wants a rate cut. Clearly the markets are sort of factoring it in there. But I think you're absolutely right. I've looked at carefully what she's been saying, Michelle Bullock, over the past year. And for her to cut rates now would actually make a mockery of most of the logic she's laid out over the past year. So it would be very difficult for her to explain. But taking up that second point you made, we've had an informal election campaign since pretty much New Year's Day. And from the government, it's included even more spending. I mean, how much longer will this go on and what damage will it do to this long-term inflation fight?
Yeah, it's just nuts. I mean, I think that our leaders at the moment are really just not reading the writing on the wall, either from Australian consumers or, honestly, from overseas signals. Trump with the Doge and the cutting of waste in government. I mean, if you had one thing to do to try to reduce government spending, it's cut all those bureaucratic jobs and red tape jobs that are not adding anything. Why do we think our productivity is in a slump? Well, all these jobs that are being created, so many of them are public sector jobs. And some of those are necessary, but an awful lot are just paper pushing jobs that don't add anything of real value to the economy. So I just think the government is desperately trying to preserve its own skin, its own reputation, and the employment of its many bureaucrats. And this is what it's going to do. It's going to keep the hands in the ears and la as long as it possibly can, and just not face the writing on the wall.
That's it, like a kid having a tantrum, a toddler having a tantrum. Thanks very much, Gigi. Appreciate it.